Yeah, Podfest is a show of content creators that have come together to help each other grow. And we started about 10 years ago with just 13 people at a meetup. So it's a very special thing that now we have thousands of individuals that come together.
Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
And you've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Welcome back to Clicks and Bricks. Today we've got Chris from Podfest. I know I say I'm super excited to talk about all of my guests, but specifically Chris because Podfest is coming up and it is one of my favorite shows of the year. How are we doing today, Chris?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on, Ken.
Thanks for joining us. You're coming from us from a car dealership right now. Is that correct?
I am.
All right.
Yes, in the back of a Highlander, I believe.
So getting work done no matter what. I love it. That is a lot of dedication. Just sitting in the dealership and jumping in the car to shoot a podcast really quick. That is dedication to your trade for sure. Chris, Podfest is my favorite show of the year. Last year was the first time I attended, and it blew every other show out of the water. Can you tell the guests a little bit about what Podfest is 2023 and what they can expect coming up?
Yeah, Podfest is a show of content creators that have come together to help each other grow. And we started about 10 years ago with just 13 people at a meetup. So it's a very special thing that now we have thousands of individuals that come together. Active podcasters, we help people get started. And it's just a show that really goes deep into the world of podcasting and how to grow your show and connect with other content creators. We have a lot of business people too that come to learn and also potentially work with podcasters.
Wonderful. Yeah, it is such a great show. You started as just a regular meetup?
Yeah, 13 people at a meetup.
Okay. So how many years did you do I do a lot of meetups. Some of them are annual, some of them are monthly. Was it an annual meetup or a monthly meetup when you started?
It was a weekly meetup that we were doing internet marketing, and podcasting was one of the topics. And then I took that meetup, that educator at the meetup that came through my system, and we did workshops all over Florida. Then all these people got started podcasting and they started calling me for advice. And then I said, guys, I can't be doing this because I don't have all the answers either. And that's when we started Podfest, and we brought all those people that we helped at that conference. 100 people showed up, then 200 people showed up the next year. And then we just kept doubling year over year to where we're at now. And now people just fly in from all over the world to attend Podfest. It's really cool to see.
It is. How many years has it been going on?
This will be our 9th year in person. We haven't missed a year, I don't think. And then next year will be this year coming up will be a 9th, and then we'll hit our 10-year anniversary.
Oh, wonderful. And January 26th this year?
Yep. January 26th to 29th is Podfest in Orlando, Florida at the Renaissance SeaWorld Orlando Hotel. It's world class. It's going to be amazing.
Yes. I don't know how many people are showing up this year. Last year was a couple thousand.
It'll be around the same. Right now, what we're doing is focusing on helping the larger creators as well as the beginners. But we have a focus this year of really connecting our pro side of things and adding value for the larger creators. It's one of our initiatives.
Right. One thing that you did last year that I loved, and I haven't seen at any other conferences of your size that I went to, is you really focused on bringing creators together, putting us together at tables, making us play games together, really getting to know each other. It wasn't a, sit down and get talked to for a couple of days and try to sell my products and everything. What was it? How did you know that was the method that was going to knock this really out of the park, getting the creators together and collaborating together?
So I've had other businesses that are in this genre of bringing people together. And one of the things that we noticed was you need to collaborate the members. And I had an actuary a few years ago, and that's someone that basically crunches numbers, create a mathematical equation for me specifically on how to connect the most people together in the less stressful way in the least amount of time. So we ran through a lot of different mathematical equations. So what you experience, we call it the influencer meet and greet.
Okay.
In our business group, we call that our strategic alliance session. We never call it speed networking because that's not what it is, and you experience it's a little different.
Yeah, it is.
That's probably one of the hallmarks of our events or any events that I do, and that literally creates collisions at a level that you can't get anywhere else.
Yes, it was a phenomenal experience for me, and I'm so looking forward to it coming up and just right around the corner now, right? By the time this show airs, it'll be
Next
probably
year,
next
but around
week.
the corner, yes.
Yeah. So, Orlando, Florida, but Podfest is not your only show that you do. Is that correct?
Yeah, we produce a variety of shows. So we have shows on real estate blockchain, shows on Bitcoin, and a couple other things that we do. We have a consulting arm, and we're actually launching an entire division for the pro podcasters coming up, which will be a little different.
Nice. And I think I'm part of that as well. So
Yeah,
I'm
you are, and it's going to get bigger.
Yeah, I'm excited about that as well. So Clicks and Bricks, I like to talk about how and give people tips and advice on how to start their company. So if somebody's out there and they're looking at your show as an example and they're in some other industry and they're wanting to start a show or do something similar to you, you gave us a great outline on how to get started, right? Start with meetups and then go to seminars. Can you walk us a little bit through? I think everybody knows what the meetups look like, right? Weekly meetups, your kind of
those
ad
are
hoc
fairly-
people are coming and going. You start doing the seminars around town and people start calling you. That first show, right? I mean, if you're a business owner, you've tried your first webinar, you've tried your first live event, you've tried your first all of these things. And I think for most of us, our first is, I'll say, learning experience. A lot of people call it their first failure. What kind of things would you recommend somebody that's going to try to do their first show? What are like 2 or 3 of the key things that they need to have together to at least help ensure a good turnout?
Yeah, let's say you're doing a one-day event or your half-day workshop,
Right.
whatever, but something in that vein. The first thing I do is I get 25 key contacts, people that are my closest individuals that would want that information, and I would call them ambassadors. I would figure out a way to comp their tickets in lieu of promotion, or give them a half price ticket. But basically, I would try and seal my first 25 attendees one-on-one. And then I would market, especially if it's a brand, if they represent a brand other people know in the community, I would market that they're attending at my conference. And then I would use tools like Eventbrite, Facebook, maybe some, small ads on social to attract the rest of the people. I would never apologize about the size of an audience. That's something that a lot of beginners do. The moment you apologize that you don't have 100 people when you have 50, you just told the 50 people that they're not worth as much as 100. So, and I always shortchange the chairs in the room. Now for Podfest, Ken, you've been part of it. It's such a big event, I can't do that. But for these one-day events, you can do that. If you know you only have 30 people attending, then only set up 30 chairs, because maybe some people won't attend last minute, but now it looks like a packed house. Right. And use tables to fill up the room. If your room is big, then use round tables. I'll give you an example. Recently, we had an event where it was one of the blockchain events. When blockchain was heavy, we'd get 1,000 people. All of a sudden, we're barely getting 200 people. But when I set up the room with round tables, 60-inch rounds, 6 people to a round, not only did it fill up the room, but when people took pictures, they were like, wow, it's packed, it's sold out. We see with our eyes, we don't see the actual numbers. So that's something I would just say, it's a promotional trick, but it does work because people feel when there's just as many chairs as people, they feel special and they feel that they got the hot ticket. Last thing you want is someone feeling like you're supposed to have 1,000 people and they were the dumb ones that bought the tickets to your event. So you want to make them feel special. And that's a big technique. It's not even a trick. It's a big technique in promotions.
Absolutely. It's a big technique, I think, across the board, right? If you have a business, if there's only one person shopping your shelves, you want to treat them like there's 100 people in there and they're the most special person ever to
Correct.
shop in your store. So making them feel special, I think, is a huge part of business as a whole. Seeing with your eyes at the round tables makes a lot of sense. I think that most people would love to do shows like you do, but they can't get over the fear of not selling it out. Is that
Yeah. So my advice on that is start ugly. I wrote a book about starting, being okay with 20 people. I want to be very clear, Ken. I started my promotional career doing meetups. I was happy if two people showed up, even if one person showed up. It was more than I had. And what I would do is I would make them feel so special because I truly was so grateful for them to show up that they would go bring friends. And then over time, we grew this massive community. But it all started with being grateful for one or two people showing up for something that I was putting on. So and I'm still grateful to this day for people taking time out of their schedule to be with me. And this after COVID, people are evaluating their time in a much different way. To even my wife will order stuff that she never ordered online. She's like, it's just easier. I'm not going to the store anymore.
right?
So people are not leaving their house as easily as they once did. So if they do, you should value that time.
Right. And treating the two guests, if you start a podcast, you've got to have a little bit of the same mentality. Unless you've got a big budget, you're going to make several shows. For me, it was hundreds of shows
100%
before 10 people would watch the episode, right? And then it snowballs kind of quickly when you keep going at it, right? So do you think that the tenacity and keep going was the trick in getting you to where you're at today?
Yeah, I never thought of giving up. Now, when the business got bigger and you're dealing with huge budgets and people working for you, that's a different story. But when only because you're other people are dependent on you, and that's a lot of pressure if
Right.
you're thinking about other people in their lives and their families. But when I was by myself, I didn't care. I mean, I was just happy. I remember the one year I made $30,000 or $40,000, and I was giggling to my wife. I'm like, "Can you believe I get paid to?" I was doing like 200 meetups a year or something.
Right.
And she's like, that's not a lot of money. I go, it is to me because I get to do what I love. And I said, opportunities will show up later, but I'm just happy that I could be net positive after years of grinding it out, not making anything.
Right.
But it all depends on the risk tolerance of the individual. And I also didn't have a family at the time and all that stuff. However, I'm very grateful that I designed what I wanted to do. And I'm the kind of entrepreneur that I remember once I tried to put a resume together. I just scrapped it. Like, I'm that kind of entrepreneur. From 8 years old, I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. So I'm not someone that's comfortable holding down a job, and there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. I don't want to discourage. Everybody has their skill sets. Just for me, I was an entrepreneur, like from 8 years old. I would draw little restaurants because I'm Greek, what diner I was going to own when I grew up on a piece of paper at school. Literally, I remember this from 8 years old on. So
Really?
I knew I was going to be working for myself. Yeah, I never graduated college. I went to college. I took courses I thought I would like, but I never even cared for the degree when I realized it wasn't going to serve my future.
Right. I'm very similar with my college career. I took classes and never got my degree.
Yeah,
But-
there you go.
So your wife kind of, busting you up a little bit about not that much money in the early days, but today you two are working together.
Yeah, we are. So one of the businesses that we have, and I would say I'm a second fiddle in that one, is Katie's Meditation Empire. So my wife has the Women's Meditation Network. She literally helps millions of women all over the world with meditations. And I'll run the marketing behind the scenes because that's what I really enjoy. I also run the kid-friendly network for children on podcasting. So I don't talk about that often, but that's something we established years ago. That's one of the largest. Ken, you'll appreciate this. I was consulting on a project, helping a friend, and I basically laid out the schematic, and he did not want to start a kid-friendly. He just wanted to do something with his son. And I remember going home to my wife and saying, man, I just gave this guy the $1 million ticket. And she said, well, why didn't you start it? And I said, well, I'm capped out on my time. And she goes, when have you ever let limiting beliefs stop you? And it made me think. My wife's a great lady. So I went to my meetup these meetups have been instrumental for me, by the way. I went to my meetup that next day. I had the Florida Podcast Association. We've been doing it for over 10 years locally. There was an unemployed comedian that his jokes never landed with the audience. They were all like dad jokes. And I said, this would be great to kick off my network, kid-friendly joke of the day. I hired him on the spot. Since then, he's been producing all my shows. We've been doing it now for 4 years. And it's one of the largest. And the reason why I created it was I have two little ones. When I listen to Joe Rogan or someone, you don't realize they're cursing because you're in the car
Right.
and you're just appreciating what is. When you have your little one, you notice right away. So I was like, we need something clean for parents, even if it's cheesy for 5 minutes while you're driving kids to daycare. And that was the only thing I've ever done, Ken, on the social media front.
Right.
It got 1,000 downloads within the first 24 hours. And all I did was post it on my Facebook, and I'm not a celebrity. So it just told me I found a market that was waiting for something. It was one of those, you know?
Absolutely. So you're the reason we have all the dad jokes on TikTok today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bad ones for sure.
They are hilarious. The deadpan dad jokes when the celebrities are just sitting there giving them to each other is absolutely hilarious. You're right. That is $1 million ticket. Congratulations for not letting that time restraint keep you from moving forward.
That's credit to Katie, my wife. She's amazing.
Do you have a podcast yourself?
So the Kid Friendly Network is what I produce. And then I do start and stop podcasts quite often. So I started Conference Cash Flow, which was a podcast to help people with conferences.
Right.
Story Jam Theater was a storytelling podcast. We started a YouTube channel. So I would say I am a person that loves starting projects. And then when I'm ready, I'll revisit them. And then I do have my, Podfest and the event side really keeps me busy. So that's really my primary.
Right.
And then Katie's marketing for her network.
It is definitely a field for ADD folks. There's lots of things for us to do to keep ourselves active and moving forward. And there's always fun.
We get in trouble if we don't have a couple of things to just mess with every now and then.
Absolutely. So you have the Florida Podcast Exchange. Are there other podcast exchanges around the country?
There's one in Nashville. There's a handful. The Florida Podcast has been one of the most consistent. There's not as many as I would like to see. So that's an opportunity out there to bring people together. We notice the state of Colorado has a lot of talent. So I'm now going around the country doing meetups, and you learn a lot about different regions. But there are some meetups, but they're not as consistent. There's a few, I would say another 3 or 4 in the country that are consistent. Okay.
I love that concept of creating a podcast exchange. I know here in St. Louis, there's a handful of us at least, right? I've not done a deep dive into how many folks are in the St. Louis market doing podcasts, but definitely intriguing and something I would like to talk to you offline with about getting that together. So Podfest Expo, and that's just podfestexpo.com, correct?
Correct.
We'll throw the links on the bottom. If somebody's in Florida or wanting to travel, what are some of the things that they'll learn at that show?
You're going to learn how to grow, how to expand. We have a lot of wildcard sessions too, which I like. Could be like, hey, how to kink out your email system, how to get people to share your message. What does your message look like? Is it worth sharing? So there's about 150 different tracks of learning.
Wow.
But you're going to be hanging out with actual people in the field that are doing this full time. So that's very rare. And that's because we built this reputation over a decade. So you might go to a podcast meetup, but going to a conference like this, everybody's an influencer. So it's a very rich environment of people with audiences. And we call them messengers. A lot of them are messengers with a message.
Right. And that's everywhere from the guy that wants to get started with this podcast all the way up to the person that's already got 1 million+ downloads.
Yeah, we're very rare in that we run the gamut from, I don't know what to do, I need help, we'll get you the help, to, hey, I got a lot of downloads and I think I'm making money, but I want to make more money. And how do I, what kind of team members do I need?
Right. I know that for any shows out there that are watching, and Podfest is coming up, last year I went to Podfest and it was a catalyst moment for our show. We got signed on with C-Suite Network and we've been growing at a much greater rate just from that one show. So I definitely put 100% of my recommendations behind. If you want to know about more about podcasting, Podfest is the place to go and check it out. Chris, we're on a limited time frame today, and you're literally in the car dealership. Before we go, is there anything you would like? I
apologize about that, Ken.
Oh, it's okay. I think it's actually fun. I like the hustle mentality and the get the work done no matter what mindset. It's a joy to me. So is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with before we go? And our audience is small and medium-sized business owners and people that want to start their business.
Yeah, whenever you're in doubt, start ugly. Start ugly, start ugly, and perfectly execute along the way.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time today, Chris. I had a blast talking with you, and I'm super excited to see you in January. Thanks for watching today's episode of Clicks and Bricks. Get to work.